All right, we're going to start chapter 4, section 1. This chapter is going to be about Egypt. And many of you could probably name a lot of things tied to ancient Egypt, which you see some of them on the screen. And let's go ahead and we will start with a quick little video about Egypt.
The ancient Egyptian civilization lasted for over 3,000 years and became one of the most powerful and iconic civilizations in history. At its height, ancient Egypt's empire stretched as far north as modern-day Syria and as far south as today's Sudan. But long before it was an empire, ancient Egypt was a series of small, independent city-states that bloomed along North Africa's Nile River. The city-states were divided into two regions and named according to the flow of the Nile. Upper Egypt in the south, which was upstream, and Lower Egypt in the north, which was downstream. By about 3100 BC, the two halves united, thereby creating one Egyptian state that lasted for millennia. The reign of this civilization can be divided into three major periods of prosperity, called the Old, Middle, and New Kingdoms, and two periods of instability in between, called the First and Second Intermediate Periods. Guiding the Egyptian people was a succession of about 300 rulers, often referred to as pharaohs. Pharaoh, which means great house in Egyptian, was never the ruler's formal title. It only became synonymous with a ruling individual in modern times, thanks to its use in the Hebrew Bible. These rulers, who were not always men, nor Egyptian, were considered protectors of the people and served as divine liaisons between humanity and the hundreds of gods they worshipped. After the rulers passed away, ancient Egyptians believed they then became gods. To prepare their journey into the afterlife, the rulers constructed elaborate tombs, including the Great Pyramids at Giza and underground mausoleums in the Valley of the Kings. Rulers filled their tombs with all the items they could need in the afterlife, including gold, jewelry, food, drink, and even pets. Preparing for this journey to the gods also involved mummifying one's body. The deceased's corpse was embalmed, wrapped in hundreds of yards of linen, and placed inside the tomb so the body could be reanimated in the afterlife. To this day, structures like the Great Pyramids are a testament to the role of religion in ancient Egyptians' lives. But they also represent the innovative and cultural might of the Egyptian people. Innovations in mathematics and written language in particular propelled their civilization to success. Math, specifically measurement mathematics, helped Egyptians understand and harness their world with numbers like no other civilization had before. They developed a new form of measurement called the cubit. It was used to design massive structures, such as the Great Pyramid, with remarkable geometrical precision. The Egyptians also measured time. By combining mathematics with astronomy, they established a 24-hour division to the day and created a solar calendar, which was the first dating system in history to feature 365 days in 1 year. Lastly, Egyptians developed methods to measure and survey land around the Nile River. These civil engineering feats made way for the construction of dams, canals, and irrigation systems that helped farming and agriculture to flourish in the Nile Valley. In addition to mathematical concepts, the ancient Egyptians also created written languages to describe the world around them. The oldest and probably most well-known of these is hieroglyphic writing. This system was developed around 3150 BC during the Old Kingdom and has over 700 pictorial characters. It was used to inscribe monuments and pottery and predominantly served a decorative or ceremonial purpose. Soon after, another ancient form of writing, called hieratic, developed out of the hieroglyphic system. It was a form of cursive that was written in ink and served a more functional purpose. Unlike its more formal predecessor, hieratic was written on another ancient Egyptian innovation, papyrus. Papyrus was a type of paper derived from the papyrus plant, which grew plentifully along the Nile River. This medium gave the ancient Egyptians a new avenue of communication and record keeping that allowed their civilization's administrative skill to grow and their culture to spread for thousands of years. As with all great empires, ancient Egypt came to an end. It was eventually conquered after a series of invasions, including those by the Persian Empire in the 4th century BC and the Roman Empire around 30 BC. Not many civilizations can claim a lifespan of over 3,000 years, let alone one that made vast cultural contributions that still resonate in modern times. Ancient Egypt, with its linguistic and mathematical innovations, spirituality and religion, and extensive political and military might, set a high standard for all civilizations that followed.
All right, so as we take a look at Egypt here, so we're talking in the northeastern corner of Africa. This is where you're going to see the Egyptians settle. And they are going to borrow ideas from Samaria, from Sumer, from the Sumerians. But they're going to last quite a bit longer. And Egypt, once unified, is going to become very rich and powerful and have a very long lasting influence on the world. So let's start off here and talk about, we talked about with Sumer and Sumerians in Mesopotamia, you got that Tigris and the Euphrates River. When we talk Egypt, the river you're going to be talking about is the Nile. So you got the Nile River, which flows north. So it flows up there towards the Mediterranean Sea. It's going to flow 4,145 miles. It is the longest river in the world, going from the mountains down there towards the bottom of the map there up to the Mediterranean Sea. Only about 600 miles of this river are actually in Egypt, and it cuts this narrow green valley in otherwise desert. And at the mouth of the Nile, you're going to see the formation of a delta. Okay, so there's that narrow green valley as it goes down, and you see a green delta up there at the mouth of the river. When we talk delta, we're talking this fan-shaped area of fertile land deposited at the mouth of a river. So a lot of the dirt is being swept down, and it's going to be deposited there in the delta. And so the Nile River is going to be crucial to this Egyptian society. It's going to be a fantastic form of transportation. When you need to get somewhere in Egypt, everything was along the Nile River, so you could use the Nile River as a form of transportation. Most of the people lived in the area of the delta, even though that delta is only going to be about 3% of Egypt's land. But they're going to have protection there from a long time. On one side, you've got the sea. Around them on the land, you have the desert. Upstream, you have cataracts upstream there. And Egypt does, like a lot of rivers do, a flood. Every year in July, there were floods. And when the floodwaters would recede, it left behind a very rich soil, a very fertile soil. And they would grow flax and wheat and barley and grapes. They would plant the crops when the ground was still wet, still damp. And then when the ground started to dry out, after the floods, they would actually use something called a shadoof to bring water to their fields. This was used to lift water from the Nile to water the crops. And here you can actually see how a shaduf was used. Okay, so bringing water from down there and bringing it up into where they need the water to go. They put the water in the basins in these bowl-shaped holes. Okay, so you can see them getting water from way down there. They bring it up and they put it there. Okay, so this is how a shaduf worked. Because remember, you're in Egypt, so there is a long dry season that would have all your crops die because you are planting in a desert. So you see as that water goes along there and goes from the Nile down into wherever they're going to direct it towards their fields. So this flooding was a lifeline to the Egyptians every year. Now, today in Egypt, you had the Aswan Dam. So you see the Aswan Dam there. It was built in 1960 to protect crops, protect the people from all of this flooding. So there's no more flood to deposit this very fertile soil. So today, you rely on the use of chemical fertilizers instead of the flooding depositing that fertile soil. So Egypt is actually nicknamed the gift of the Nile. This is a phrase to describe Egypt. It was first used by Herodotus, which was a historian. And that can mean a lot of things. But you got this idea that without the Nile, you would just have desert there. So Egypt is the gift of the Nile.